Hello, this is Mark Galliotti of In Moscow Shadows with one of my very occasional video responses to breaking news. Well, it's the 12th of February 2025 and we just had news of an extensive phone conversation, an hour and a half long, between Presidents Trump and Putin, after which lots of positive mood music, claims that their teams are going to be getting together to arrange some kind of peace deal in Ukraine, claims that both men really want the fighting to stop, and at the same time US Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth laying out very clearly that Ukraine is not going to become a member of NATO and that the United States is not going to provide any peacekeeping forces. So it's on the Europeans if it's going to be at all. So just a couple of quick points about that. First of all, it's striking the degree to which President Zelensky, using his quite considerable political skills, has been trying to woo Trump after their initial rather inauspicious start, when Zelensky got dragged into some of the domestic politics in the Trump versus Biden era. And, well, so far it seems that he has failed. He has tried flattery, essentially presenting Donald Trump as the one man who can save Ukraine and save world peace and defer the prospects of some kind of World War III. He has tried economic suasion, offering the chief executive officer of US Incorporated the option of priority access to investment in Ukrainian minerals, rare earths, and priority access to reconstruction projects, which incidentally would probably get up the Europeans' nose to some degree, but that's a separate issue. He understands that, frankly, Washington matters rather more than Brussels or Berlin. And none of that seems to have worked. We instead have the spectacle of what seems to be Trump and Putin talking as if Moscow and Washington can, between them, sort out a deal. It's interesting that after this conversation, Trump said that we will be informing Zelensky and that he himself would be having a phone conversation with him. These are not the days of nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. No, I mean, it is clear that as far as Trump's concerned, he's perfectly happy to go over Kyiv's head and just simply let Kyiv know what he's decided. So this is exactly what Putin was looking for. Firstly, that sense of parity between the American and Russian presidents, something that clearly flatters the Russian presidency no end, because Russia is not a great power on America's level. Secondly, the sense that something can be sorted out between them. And in effect, what this means is that it will be the United States' job to twist Zelensky's arm to accept whatever deal eventually gets sort of sorted out. And in that respect, well, clearly it will be playing to Trump's clear desire to actually not just end the war, but also extricate himself from commitments in Europe. That said, final point that needs to be made is this. There is no deal yet. What we have is an agreement that their respective teams, and it's worth noting after all that a pretty dramatic concentration of the people involved, from President Zelensky to US Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Vice President J.D. Vance, representative to Ukraine General Kellogg, will all be in Munich for the Munich Security Conference this coming weekend. So I imagine there's going to be a lot of behind-the-scenes discussion, maybe even acrimony. We'll have to see what emerges from that. Ukraine still clearly feels that it needs to have proper security guarantees, and it's right. If there is simply a ceasefire, which is the kind of minimal agreement that there could be, which is essentially just saying both sides stop fighting, Russia remains in control of, 19 to 20% of Ukraine's territory, has the option of essentially freezing the conflict like that, or the option of restarting the war, frankly, at a time of its choosing. And the Ukrainians, who clearly would not want to break Trump's ceasefire for fear of forfeiting any assistance that they get from the Americans, would be very much on the defensive, and Zelensky would be faced with a terrible and formidable strategic dilemma. Does he bow to a growing chorus in his own country to allow at least some of the mobilized troops, if not to be demobilized, at least to be rotated away from the front line, running the risk that he weakens Ukraine's defences at a point when Putin can restart the war whenever he wants? Or does he instead hold the line, with all the costs to his political reputation. And remember, if the ceasefire lasts, then there will be more and more calls for martial law to be lifted and thus for presidential elections to be held. But also there is an economic cost to keeping your forces fully mobilised and on the border. So from this point of view, today, as of the 12th of February, I think politically speaking, Putin can be very, very happy with himself. And the prospect, not just of a potential promised Trump visit to Moscow, but perhaps even more striking, a Putin visit to the United States. Someone who is kind of wanted for alleged, and frankly very plausible, war crimes, actually being hosted as a head of state in the United States. I mean, that is not something we could have imagined that we would see. And frankly, I imagine it's even beyond what Putin thought he could hope for. So, a good day for Putin. A good day if you just want to see the killing end in Ukraine. But if you're concerned about Ukraine's long-term security, and if you are concerned about the international order and the fact that it's not something that a power like the United States ought to be able to just simply revise at its own convenience, not such a good day. Thank you.